It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
What is the most absolutely insane story you have ever heard? Let me go ahead and tell you one right now. There was a guy named Harrison O'Keene. He was on a ship and it got into a really bad storm and it sank all the way to the bottom of the ocean. And he survived and lived in the ship underwater for 3 days until he was finally rescued by divers. Like, he was literally sitting in the dark underwater in a boat, like in an air pocket. Like, that's absolutely crazy. Let me tell you another story. There was a story of a guy, I've read it before, and he's trying to travel down the road and he has a donkey with him. And he gets so mad at the donkey because the donkey isn't going the way he wants it to go. He starts whipping the donkey and like beating the donkey. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the donkey starts talking to him, like me and you kind of talking. It's absolutely crazy. Now, the first story I told you is about a guy named Harrison O'Keene. He really did sink to the bottom of the ocean in a ship and survived for 3 days until he was rescued. The second story I told you is actually really recorded in the Bible. It's of a guy named Balaam, and you can find it in Numbers chapter 22. Now, it's really hard sometimes when we hear things that we don't understand or don't have the full story for to actually really believe those things. It's kind of like walking into a conversation in the middle of it between two people, and you don't really know what started it, you don't really know where it's going, you don't really know where it is, and you hear things that you don't really understand or things don't really make any sense. And a lot of times, that's how we feel about the Bible. You see, the thing about the Bible is this. It's a huge document. And sometimes when we just read one little part of it and we don't have the surrounding story, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And this happens a lot of times with middle schoolers I know. They'll read a verse or they'll read a part of a story and it won't make any sense. It'll be really weird. They won't understand what it's talking about, and it'll seem like it shouldn't even really belong in the Bible. And that's what we have to be careful with. When we read the Bible, we have to know about this thing called context. Now, I'm sure you've had somebody talk to you about context before. Like, they'll be talking about something, and they'll say, listen, you have to know the context. And the same is with the Bible. We have to know the context of the story. You have to know the surrounding situation. You need to really know what is going on before, during, and after what is written. Because if not, you can take something out of context and it doesn't make any sense. Let me give you an example. My favorite football player of all time is a guy named Tim Tebow. Okay, some of you know about Tim Tebow because for like 30 seconds he was on the Denver Broncos football team and he did some amazing things. But anyways, when he was in college, he went to the University of Florida and he put up huge numbers at UF. He won a couple national championships. He had all kind of records. He was an amazing football player. And he's also a very strong Christian. And what he did is he would put Bible verses on the black tape under his eyes. And one of the verses that he put up one time is Philippians 4:13. Philippians 4:13 says this, "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." What an awesome verse, right? So I have seen this verse quoted and used by tons of people all the time. They'll say it right before a big game. They'll say it right before a test. They'll say it right before they have to go to work and do like a sales job and stuff like that. And they're like, you know what? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's really cool. But at the same time, I don't think that verse you keep saying means what you think it means. You see, Paul, he's the guy who wrote Philippians 4:13. Paul was an apostle of Jesus, which means that he traveled the world and he was telling tons of people about Jesus. And he wrote a good chunk of what we know as the Bible. And Paul wrote Philippians 4:13, and when he did write it, he wasn't scoring a touchdown. He wasn't making the game-saving play. He wasn't acing a test. You know where Paul was when he wrote Philippians 4:13? Prison. He was in prison. And not like a nice prison. Not like, oh, here's 3 square meals a day and some TV time. No. Paul was in the bottom of a nasty prison. And you want to know why he was in prison? For being a Christian. That doesn't sound like he's doing all things very well. When you're in prison, you're not really doing a whole lot of anything. But what Paul was saying in these verses that is Philippians 4:13 and the verses before and after it is that he has enough faith in who Jesus is that regardless of his circumstances, regardless of what's going on in his life, he still has victory solely based on the fact that he has a relationship with Jesus. He's not saying because of my circumstances I have victory. He's not saying because of my financial status or how much money I have or the things I do or the people I hang out with or the records I've set. That's not what he's saying. He is saying only based on Jesus and who he is the reason I have victory. And so, what should we do? What's our takeaway from all this, from just one simple verse and looking at it? Guys, you need to know the context of things that you read. I know that can be hard. I know a lot of people have probably just quoted you a quick verse sometimes to try and tell you something, and it might have fit, it might not. But here's what you need to understand, is that we need to look at the Bible as a whole. And to be honest, when it was written, they didn't write it down in verses. They wrote it as one big section. There wasn't verses until a long time ago when somebody decided to number things to help people remember them. That's the whole reason we even have verses. So here's what I want you to do. In order for the Bible to make sense, I want you to work on learning the whole story. I'm not saying you have to read the whole Bible from beginning to end, But when you want to read a part of the Bible, which I encourage you to do daily, read a whole piece of it together. Don't just read a verse by itself. Read a section together. Read a chapter together. Read several verses together. That way, it won't be confusing. That way, you won't look at something and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't sound like what God would say. Well, because when you read things together, it gives you the whole idea. It gives you the whole story. And to better understand the Bible, there's 3 questions that we can ask as we read it. The first question is this: who wrote this and who are they writing to? This is a big deal because this shows you really the situation of the person who's writing it and the situation of the people they're writing to. Because people's lives are different and the things that were happening were different. So the authors wrote different things to different people to make sure that they were following Jesus. Number 2, ask why was this written? Why was this written will really help you understand the meaning of the passage that you're reading and how to apply it to your life. 3, is this helpful for me right now? Now, I know that's a weird question to ask, but here's why. Because sometimes in your life, you'll read a part of the Bible and you'll feel like it really isn't applying to your life in that moment. But if you go ahead and mark it or write it down or even memorize it, possibly later on in your life, you will need to be able to look back and see how that passage of the Bible applies to your life and can help you grow closer to Jesus. Whenever you're reading the Bible, regardless of how old you are or what stage of life you're in or where you are, I want you to think about it like this. I want you to think of it as God's words to you. Now, the Bible isn't about you, but God is speaking to you through it. And he wants you to take the truth in the Bible and apply it to your life, in your situation, in your time. So, as we turn and we start talking in our small groups, man, ask your small group leader questions. Ask them about passages that you don't understand. And also, what I want to challenge you to do is ask and think about what part of the Bible do you really want to get to know the whole story about? What part of the Bible maybe have you been confused about or didn't make any sense? And commit this week to go look at that part of the Bible and look at it as the whole story and not just one little piece. Because here's the truth. When you know the whole story, things make more sense. And when things make more sense, you'll get to know who Jesus is more and more, and you'll grow in your relationship with him.